One thing I always sort of believed when I was learning to write, and I learned to write better, or at least learn something every day. I certainly am not as good as I want to be yet. But one of the things I've always sort of believed is that if you don't feel the emotion, then the reader won't feel it. So if you're not crying when you write, the reader won't cry. If you're not laughing when you write, the reader won't laugh. So I think you have to put a lot of yourself into the books. And you're right, in some of the chapters and in some of the topics that can be taxing. But I think ultimately the goal is to have somebody share that catharsis for whatever that chapter or section of a book is. And so it's important to put yourself on the page as much as you can.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Okay, everybody. So imagine that you are a new lawyer, fresh out of Cornell Law. Your pro bono client is a convicted bank robber dying in solitary confinement because prison won't give him heart medication. The town loves the prison. Witnesses disappear. Evidence vanishes. You're fighting a system designed to crush you. In the middle of it, you're having your own battles at home, and most people would walk away from this. But our guest today didn't just stay, he won. And he wrote about it. On today's episode, we're going to be talking with Michael Stockham, a litigation partner at Holland & Knight who spent over 2 decades in courtrooms handling investigations and class actions, and now he's making legal thrillers that make you weep and thrillers that make your heart race. So, Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer is the book of this conversation today. And without further ado, Michael, welcome to the show. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for having me on. It's a blessing to be here.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Of course, and thank you for saying that. It's a blessing to have you on too. I think this is a very interesting topic to discuss because, a lot of people, might have a little bit of an insight about what it might be like to be a lawyer or to be involved in a prison system, for example. But thrillers, when you take it like that, really just add an element of, of course, excitement, but also teach us a little bit about what it's like. And I think you've kind of integrated your own life into this book, in a way at least, if that could be said. Or am I off? Let me know. Am I on the right track here?
No, you're on the exact right track. So the book it has 2 sort of narrative themes to it, or narrative lines, and they are inspired by true events, and then creatively we collapse them onto one chronological spine, if you will, so that they'd end up being one story, even though they occurred several years apart from each other.
Understood. So that's really cool that you did that. So is it safe to say then that you were kind of collecting notes throughout the time when you're actually living the experiences, then you kind of went back to those memories and those experiences and put that into the outline as you began to work on it?
Absolutely. So the experience was both historical, because I kept the file for the prisoner case that I did for his name in the book is Emmett Kendrick, but his real name is Edwin Kimbrell, and I consider him a good friend that I made over a very short period of time. He was a very interesting man, and so I've actually gone back, and there are a number of things in the book that are taken directly from the case file or from the trial, and there are some letters in there from the prisoner and from the judge, and others that are actually typed directly from the letters that we received.
That's incredible. So that's really cool. When you read this book, everybody, it's kind of authentic content, like directly from those letters and from those, transcripts, documents, whatever it might be. That's really cool. And I think a lot of authors can learn from that and, collect materials, collect writings, and you never know when you might want to put it into a book to share with others one day. So real cool. But what exactly inspired you to start turning this into a book? Was there a certain catalyst that happened that were like, you know what? I've been experiencing and working all these years, but it's time to write a book. What was that
decision point for you?
The chronological decision point really came about with COVID, with looking for other things to do during shutdowns and other things. I originally did not start off to be a lawyer. So I have an undergraduate degree in writing poetry and a master's degree in writing short fiction. And then I bounced around for about 5 or 6 years doing odd jobs like a mason's apprentice, a dishwasher, a technical writer, a medical device salesman, etc. And then ultimately went back to law school. And then when I became a lawyer and started on the next 20, 25 years of my career, I then couldn't really get rid of the writing bug. So I've always written in the background, either poems or short stories or novels. And then when the world sort of dislocated and stopped for COVID, it was sort of the catalyst to think, well, maybe we ought to go ahead and take a lot of those ideas and put out some novels.
Okay, understood. I think it's really cool to think about how much positive things did come out of COVID. And of course, it was a very, unfortunate time for our nation, for the world. I think a lot of creative content did come from the time we were able to put things on pause. So it's great that, that ended up being how this series and all of your books and, came to be. But so let's chat about them for a little bit. I understand you have a bunch of different books out there. I think one that's really striking to me, of course, is Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer. It seems to be exactly, on par with your experiences. So let's, chat about that a little bit. It weaves together three
Absolutely.
storylines. Yeah, absolutely. So we have the legal battle, we have the inmate struggle, we have, your wife's experiences as well. So why did you structure it that way instead of just focusing on one of the stories?
Well, it originally started as two stories, almost two novellas on two separate times with two separate themes. One was telling Edwin's story and the story of that particular trial and coming up as a young lawyer, a first year or first chance to be a first chair lawyer in a trial. And then the second one is really a love story. The idea of my wife's struggles to have our second child are really sort of her dedication and efforts to do that are really something I've always admired. And so I wrote that too. And then working with my editor, she had the idea of, well, what if we combine them into one thing to make a novel? And that's really where, to a certain extent, a lot of creativity started to jump in because you had to chronologically mix, you had to put them both, like I said, on the same chronological spine and make
Right.
the stories dovetail together.
Understood. And I think one thing that's really awesome about that is that you're able to combine it in a very seamless way. I mean, even the cover art for the book shows that you have, and I don't know if you have a copy with you right now, but I could describe it to the audience if not. There it is. It's so
Yeah.
artistic. And like you see like the prison bars on the window, but then shining down on the cradle. Was that idea yours originally? How did that come to be?
So we started working with that with a cover designer a long time ago, and he's done all four covers for my books, two published and two forthcoming. And he's really been very receptive to certain ideas. And then he would bounce back and forth. He would provide concepts, and then we would push the concept in a certain direction. But he's very, very talented. We've been very blessed to have him work with us. And that's kind of where the idea came from.
Understood. Really cool. And I love the way that sometimes you have to partner with somebody to really bring everything together for your book. People think that writing is a solitary effort, but the more people you bring on to offer ideas, it only enhances the overall quality and work of the book. So really awesome. Um, so yeah, I mean, talk to us a little bit more about the writing process itself then. So, I know it was from a bunch of different notes scattered across, the time, but what about when you actually sat down to write it? What was like a typical day in the life? Did you spend like hours writing the book, or was it more like every couple minutes whenever you had a chance jumping in between, different meetings? What was it like for you?
So um, two different efforts, two different concepts, if you will, between Jake Fox, the second novel, and the first one. The first one was a lot of sitting down in front of a blank page and thinking about what would happen next and marrying it together and um, trying to meld those two stories together. Over time, Jake Fox, the first book, Ties That Blind, had much more of a outline feel to it, although still
Mm.
sparse. And then as we've progressed over time, the current novel that we're working on that'll be out in February really gives birth. It's about a 50 to 60 page outline with 60 chapters and a lot of effort put into putting together the concepts of the book, the rhythm of the book, etc., early on, so that it's easier to sit down and take it in small bites when you're writing.
Understood. Oh, that's really cool, and I think that that's a perfect way to go about it because if you're trying to tackle too much at once, well, you might not be as productive. You might get overwhelmed. So those small bites is what we really have to think about. I think a lot of authors can benefit from that for sure. Um, so I think it's important for us to transition maybe into another one of your books, actually, Ties That Bind. That's another one that's another book that's slightly on the same par, but a little bit different. It's about, unfortunately, a suicide. So can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first book in a series, Jake Fox, Ties That Blind, deals with sort of the return of a broken lawyer whose
Mm.
career and personal life has gone off the rails in a large town. And so he goes home to his hometown, a small town that I've made up called Haven, Texas, to sort of rebuild and just have sort of a country lawyer life, if you will. And thrust
Mhm.
upon him is a murder trial defense of a young teenage girl who's wrongly accused of murdering her father.
Wow. Yeah. So it's interesting that you go from like, one book about the struggles of like the prison system to another book about these kind of topics. They're all heavy topics, heavy themes. I think to write about this must be a little bit taxing. I wondered if you had any sort of like um, well-being practice that you put into place as you were handling the emotional weight of these subjects. I mean, I'm sure as a lawyer you see this every day, but to write about it's a whole nother level. Did you find that as a challenge when you were writing it?
So the topics can be heavy to deal with. They can be intense. One thing I always sort of believed when I was learning to write, and I learned to write better, or at least learn something every day. I certainly am not as good as I want to be yet. But one of the things I've always sort of believed is that if you don't feel the emotion, then the reader won't feel it. So if you're not crying when you write, the reader won't cry. If you're not laughing when you write, the reader won't laugh. So I think you have to put a lot of yourself into the books. And you're right, in some of the chapters and in some of the topics that can be taxing. But I think ultimately the goal is to have somebody share that catharsis for whatever that chapter or section of a book is. And so it's important to put yourself on the page as much as you can.
Right, I understand that, and I think that's exactly what needs to be. Readers won't, resonate with what you're saying if you're not being as emotionally vulnerable as you can be, and that's such a profound quote. I feel like you should probably put that on, like, your website or something, like, if you're
Mhm.
not crying, the reader won't, and it's important to think about that. If you're holding back, if you're not being vulnerable, how is anyone gonna connect with your work? So really cool. So going back to the ties that bind, you actually have a couple different characters here in all different like kind of walks of life. You have a law enforcement officer, for example, Sheriff Hope Stone. So what's it like to create such different characters in the books? I mean, it must be a kind of interesting character development process for you trying to get in the minds of different people like that.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of fun, absolute fun to create characters. I'm a big fan of characters. I think that's what drives a lot of fiction very well. I also think it's what drives a lot of popular entertainment, et cetera. If you look at some of the largest series that are running on, say, Netflix or Prime or others, they're very character driven. There is plot, there is chronology, but it's really the characters people care about. They want to know what happens next to them. And so it's fun to get into the mind of different people, different age groups, totally different to write, say, Rose, who's a 15-year-old girl scared being accused of murder, compared to Hitch, who's sort of a old, grizzled, good old boy Texas lawyer. Totally different mindsets. And so it's a lot of fun. That creative part is something I greatly enjoy.
So what do you do to get into those mindsets though? Like, do you have this process or a certain hat that you wear and switch out or whatever it might be? I mean, I'm sure for me at least, whenever I'm writing a new character, I gotta kind of take a pause and think like, okay, what's the voice of this person? Did you, I don't know, have any sort of routine for that? Something that authors might also benefit from?
It's a wonderful question. Wonderful question. So, is there a routine getting into it? I don't know that I have a routine getting into certain characters. There are certain characters that I wouldn't say are more fun to write than others.
Mm.
Hitch is always a blast to write, and Hitch actually exists in both books, even though time wise, he not necessarily fits within Confessions and Jake Fox, but I intend to carry him out throughout because he's a bit of a clown and always a good stress relief. I
Right.
do spend a good deal of time sort of marrying up parts of the book, whether a chapter or a scene or something that I'm trying to create with songs. So there are actual, if I sat down and went through, say, Jake Fox Ties That Blind, I could actually put together a sound list, a playlist based on
Oh,
songs for each particular, for a number of different chapters.
that's really cool. And just a side note, I'm wondering, have you ever considered like making a Spotify playlist even for readers to listen along as you're reading? That might be kind of cool, being that that's something that you've thought of yourself. That could be kind of an interesting take.
It would be a lot of fun. It would be interesting. It would be a great experiment, right? To spend time with or have people understand what you were listening to at the same time that you read a chapter and try to get reader feedback, et cetera. Be an interesting way to work with fans, with readers, and others. Yeah, great.
Just a thought. Well, yeah, okay. So actually, now that I'm thinking about it, you have all these books out there, but you're still a practicing lawyer. You're still working with colleagues and clients all the time. Do they know you've written these books? Have they checked them out themselves? And if so, what kind of feedback have you gotten from
They do. So they
them?
Google me, and if you go out and Google my name, you'll find a lot of things related to my legal career, but then you also find the Amazon listings and other things related to the books. And so colleagues and clients find me. I've had lawyers that I've practiced with for 20 plus years come by and ask for an autograph in a book or to get it signed. I've had clients go out and just stumble across it and email me that they just finished the book and have questions about it. They're always very excited about it. I think they're very supportive of the idea that someone that and all of us do. Every job is pressing, no matter what job you do. There's always stresses of it, and I think people are very encouraged by the idea that if you have something that you want to do that's creative, it can be an addition to life, and that it can really help sort of balance out. Sort of a work-life balance, but also just balance you out as a human being. Being able to be creative is an amazing thing, and exercising it because we all can be creative one way or another.
Of course. That's really cool though, because I think that the more people see that other side of you too, not only, adds to your credibility, like the way that you're able to go from, one task to another task shows that you're capable of taking on whatever it is that's put in front of you. Meaning that, you could switch from one gear to the next, writing or client back to colleagues, whatever it might be. And also it gives them just like a nice well-rounded perspective of you to say, hey, like my lawyer wrote a book. Like that's really cool to think about.
It
So
is fun. It's always a good conversation starter, and I appreciate their interest greatly.
yeah, for sure. And all that being said, then something tells me that you're not quite done with writing. Something tells me you might have some other ideas brewing in your head. I'm wondering if you considered writing any more books, anything that people should be looking out for in the future.
That is absolutely correct. So, Jake Fox is conceived as a trilogy of trilogies. So it's really, and conceptually, we have sort of all three overarching trilogies thought of as we put them together, but it's really three sets of three books with three different sort of overarching adventures, if you will, for Jake Fox. And there may be more, but right now, taking on a project of doing 9 books seems pretty daunting. So we'll see where we get after 9.
Okay, well, awesome. I guess all we can do then is, maybe people could get connected, stay in touch, and be on the lookout if anything else does pop up on the horizon. Where is the best place for people to head to do so? Maybe your website, some social medias.
Couple, yeah. So there are 2 websites. You can go to michaelstockham.com. You can also go to jakefoxthrillers.com, which has the books on it. And if you go to Amazon, all the books are for sale. And the next one is actually up for pre-order if people are interested in it right now.
Oh, very exciting. Well, guys, we're going to put the links in the description box of this podcast today. So get on that pre order, right? And stay in the loop because Michael here is telling us stories from real experiences, but making them thrilling, even more so than they actually are. Some ways for us to really get our minds into what it's like to be in these situations and, to just better understand that world. It's really cool, Michael.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So that being said, I'm curious to know if you happen to have, any other writing tips to share with the audience today, things that maybe, you struggled with that others can learn from and implement in their own writing?
Lots of things that you struggle with as a writer any given day. And as a professional or anybody that's running a career as parallel to writing, I think the best things that you can try to do are schedules and systems. They're hard to implement, but overall, coming down to trying to write every day or trying to be creative every day makes you more productive and makes you a better writer. And then figuring out systems of how you want to do something. So, for example, when we did Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer, it was very loose, no sort of general outlines or guidelines of how we were going to put together. And it just sort of grew over time. With Jake Fox, I started to distill down into a framework. It was going to be 60 or so chapters. Each chapter was going to be 1,250 words. And then from there, when we got to Don't Forsake Me, which is the second Jake Fox book, we actually started distilling down to putting together the outline. Then there's 65 chapters, 1,250 words. And then I have guidelines myself that I use for writing that I think sort of accentuate my style. So I try to stick to them as much as possible. But that idea of schedules and systems can be very powerful depending on the genre you're writing or what kind of books you want to create.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, especially for people with such busy lives and busy schedules like yourself, I mean, you've got to kind of have that system in place to make sure that you're getting work done, but also staying accountable, not getting too overwhelmed. So did you make use of like perhaps like actual scheduling tool or any sort of like notebooks just to make sure that things lined up properly?
So I don't use a actual scheduling or whatnot. As you can imagine, since we actually had to reschedule this podcast from the original date,
Yeah.
um, sometimes my schedule is not my own. So trying to write it down is helpful, but everybody knows life gets busy. So it's just really the dedication to try to return back to the computer. There are a number of tools I use. I write on Scrivener, which is an excellent tool for authors to create their books, to move chapters, to keep notes on characters, etc. And then sometimes I augment what I'm doing with assistants like Pro Writing Aid and others, just to give me additional ideas of how perhaps I could improve the writing or further enhance my style.
Understood. Right. So that kind of find what works for you best is what I'm understanding from this. Maybe the tools are better for some people. Maybe for you, it's just figuring out what's, the best method to get it all done, to fit it all into this course of a busy day. So I think that authors can learn a lot from that. What are you going to do, everybody listening, to make sure that you can get your own writing done in the course of a busy day? Maybe you follow Michael's lead. Maybe something else is, that you can implement works better for you. Got to trial and error. Um,
Absolutely. That is the key phrase right there. Whatever works for you. Some people like to write at night, some people like to write in the morning, but don't give up. Keep writing. That's the key. Perseverance is actually probably the one word people should take away. If you want to do it, do it.
I like that. I was actually going to ask you the same thing. Like, what's one thing you hope listeners will take away from our conversation? And perseverance. I like that. I mean, it's because of that perseverance that you're able to write Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer, The Ties That Bind, The Mistakes That Make, all the other books that you in the Jake Fox series is what I'm trying to say. So it's only because of that dedication and that passion for writing too. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on today and for your time and your stories and your willingness to share you know, to try the struggles and the triumphs of your journey. It's been really inspiring.
Well, absolutely. It's been a blessing to be on, and it's been a wonderful conversation. You're very good at asking questions. You should be a lawyer.
Oh, well, maybe I will one day. I don't know about that. I think writing's probably my niche, but yeah, I love that though. For everybody listening today, just remember that your mission is that story is just noise. So just like Michael's done, write it down, create a story of it, share it with others. It's the best way to, just get connected with others and also share your passions. So perfect stuff. Until next time, everybody, keep writing, keep fighting, and keep learning from your mistakes. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.